All right, good people. Hi, it's Miss Mac. I'm back on here. Chains, chapter 2. You are going to have a quiz tomorrow on chapter 2, so I suggest you listen to the video all the way through. And remember what that little section of primary source that we see at the beginning of every chapter of Chains is called? I think that's going to be on the quiz. So let me hold it up for you. It's called an epigram. And an epigram is sort of a short quote or short reference at the beginning of a chapter. And authors often use it to sort of set the tone or the place of a particular chapter. And it's usually used in historical fiction. So that's an epigram, epigram. Remember that. You'll see it again. So chapter 2, and you really should have your books out, and you should be annotating as we read, because your annotations will be directly related to the questions on your quiz tomorrow. It will be multiple choice, 4 questions. Let's get it. Chapter 2. I'm on page 8. Chapter 2. Monday, May 27th, 1776. I, young in life, by seeming cruel fate, was snatched from Africa's fancied happy seat, that from a father seized his babe beloved, such my case, and I can then but pray others may never feel tyrannic sway. Phyllis Wheatley, to the Right Honorable William Earl of Dartmouth. Now, we're going to read that poem in its entirety later on as we get into Chains, but that's basically Phyllis Wheatley, who was enslaved and who was at this time free, and she's writing to kind of like the mayor of the town about the difficulty of slavery. And she says that she, in fact, was snatched from Africa's fancied happy seat. So in other words, she was in Africa happy, and she was snatched and sold into slavery. And that's the epigram at the beginning of chapter 2. Let's go. Amen, we said together. Pastor Weeks closed his Bible, and the funeral was over. Nehemiah drove his shovel into the mound of dirt and pitched some into the open grave. The earth rattled and bounced on the coffin lid. Old Ben put on his hat and walked toward the mule team. Ruth drew a line in the dust with her toe. My belly flipped with worry. I was breathing hard, as if I'd run all the way to the village and back. This was the moment we'd been waiting for, the one that Mama promised would come. It was up to me to take care of things, to find a place for us. I had to be bold. I stood up proper, the way I had been taught, chin up, eyes down, took Ruth by the hand, and walked over to the men. Pardon me, Pastor Weeks. Sir, I said, may I ask you something? He set his hat on his head. Certainly, Isabel. I held Ruth's hand tighter. Where do you think we should go? What do you mean, child? I know I'll find work, but I can't figure where to sleep, me and Ruth. I thought you might know a place. Pastor Weeks frowned. I don't understand what you're saying, Isabel. You're to return with Mr. Robert here. You and your sister belong to him now. Oh, hold the phone. So now, what is happening here? To me, this is a signpost. Which signpost is this? Is it a memory moment? Is it an aha moment? Is it a contrast and contradiction? Is it a tougher question? Think about what is happening here to Isabel. So Isabel is asking the pastor where she and Ruth should go. And the pastor says to her, baby, I don't understand. Mr. Robert owns you and your sister now. So think about that contrast and contradiction. You might see that on a quiz. I'm annotating myself what that is, and I want to see this annotation in your books when you come in tomorrow. I spoke slowly, saying the words I had practiced in my head since Miss Mary Finch took her last breath, the words that would change everything. Ruth and me are free, Pastor. Miss Finch freed us in her will. Mama, too, if she had lived. It was done up legal on paper with wax seals. Mr. Roberts snorted. That's enough out of you, girl. Time for us to be on the road to Newport. Was there a will? Pastor Weeks asked him. She didn't need one, Mr. Robert replied. I was Aunt Mary's only relative. I planted my feet firmly in the dirt and fought to keep my voice polite and proper. I saw the will, sir, after the lawyer wrote it. Miss Mary had me read it out loud on account of her eyes being bad. Pastor Weeks held up his hand. It's true. Your aunt had some odd notions. Stop right there. What does that mean when he says that his aunt, Miss Mary Finch, had some odd notions? Put a little gist there and make a prediction about what you think Pastor is talking about that when he says to Robert, it's true about the will. Your aunt had some odd notions. What's he talking about? Let's continue. She taught the child herself. I disapproved, of course. Only leads to trouble. I spoke up again. We're to be freed, sir. The lawyer, Mr. Cornell, he'll tell you, Ruth and me, we're going to get work and a place of our own to sleep. That's enough, Mr. Robert narrowed his eyes at me. But Mr. Cornell, I started. Shut your mouth, he snapped. The pastor cleared his throat. Perhaps we should inquire. Where is this Mr. Cornell? Mr. Robert demanded. Newport? He left for Boston before the blockade, the pastor said. Took his papers with him. The girl is lying then, Mr. Roberts said. She knows the lawyer is absent and her cause cannot be proved. The sooner I'm rid of her, the better. The sooner I'm rid of her, the better. What do you think that means? What is he talking about? And what is Mr. Roberts' plan? Put a gist there because that feels kind of like a quiz question to me. It's the truth, I blurted out. Ruth looked up at me anxiously and gripped my hand tighter. I said silence, Mr. Robert yelled. Isabel, remember your place, Pastor Weeks fumbled with the latch on his Bible. You and your sister belong to Mr. Robert now. He'll be a good master to you. Mr. Robert, I read that already. My insides went cold, like I'd swallowed water straight from a dark, deep well. This couldn't be happening. Couldn't you send a message to Boston seeking Mr. Cornell? The matter is settled. Mr. Robert pulled on his gloves. If I might borrow your wagon and man for the drive to Newport, Pastor, I'd be grateful. These girls should bring a decent price at auction. You're selling us? The words flew out of my mouth before I could weigh them. Hush, Isabel, Pastor Weeks cautioned. The cold inside me snaked down to my feet and up around my neck. I shivered in the warm spring sunshine. Ruth bent down and picked up a shiny pebble. What if we were split up? Who would take care of her? Mr. Robert knocked the dust from his hat. They should go quick. Your wagon will be back by nightfall. The minister placed the Bible in his leather satchel and pulled it up over his shoulder. He studied the ground, his hands, Mr. Robert's horse, and the clouds. He did not look at me. You'll be wanting to bring their shoes and blankets, he said finally. They'll fetch a better price that way. True enough. Now, why do you think Pastor Weeks can't look at Isabel? So this man is looking at everything, the dust. He's looking at the wagon. He's looking at Mr. Robert. He's doing everything to avoid looking directly at Isabel. Do a gist right there at the top of page 11 about why you think he can't look at Isabel. And also do a gist for signs of emerging conflict. So there's a conflict here that's emerging that's probably going to be the source or the foundation of Isabel's struggle as this life unfolds for us in this book. But I want you to do those two gists. One gist about emerging conflict, and then one gist about why you think Pastor Weeks can't look at Isabel. I'll have a word with Ben. Explain matters. Pastor Weeks walked toward his own slave, keeping a hand on the satchel so it didn't bump against his side. My heart wanted to force my feet to run, but I couldn't feel them. Couldn't feel my hands, nor my arms, nor any part of myself. I had froze solid, sticking to the dirt. We were sold once before, back when Ruth was a tiny baby, not even baptized yet. They sold all of us from the plantation when old Mr. Malborn run up his debts too high. His bankers wanted their pounds of flesh, our flesh. One by one, they dragged us forward, and a man shouted out prices to the crowd of likely buyers, and baby Ruth cried, and Mama shook like the last leaf on a tree, and Papa, he didn't want them to bust up our family like we were sheeps or hogs. I am a man, he shouted, and he was Mama's husband and our father, and baby Ruth, she cried and cried, and I thought Mama would shatter like a bowl when it falls off of a table. Papa fought like a lion when they came for him, the strongest lion, roaring. It took 5 of them with hickory clubs, and then Mama fainted, and I caught baby Ruth just in time, and there was lion's blood on the ground, mixed with the dust like the way earth was bleeding, and we left there, we 3, in Miss Mary Finch's wagon, and everything in the whole world was frozen ice for near 2 years after that. I opened my mouth to roar, but not a sound escaped. I could not even mew like a kitten. Wow, so that's a lot there. I want you to go back actually to page 11, the bottom of page 11, where she's talking about her father. And she makes this comparison of her father to a lion and how he roared and he fought. What was her father fighting for? Put a gist right there. What do you think her father was fighting for? And when she says it took 5 of them with hickory clubs, what is she talking about? Now, hickory is a kind of tree. So what were those 5 men? And who were the 5 men, do you think? And what did they do with the hickory clubs to her father? There's a little hint. There was lion's blood on the ground mixed with the dust like the very earth was bleeding. And we left there, we 3, in Miss Mary Finch's wagon. What is Isabel talking about there? What happened to her father? Were they separated? And what signpost is this? I'm just going to tell you, this is a memory moment. And remember, memory moments are very intentionally placed by authors to give you some background information and to sort of set the stage for what's currently happening. So find the memory moment there. There's another signpost that I alluded to back a couple of pages. I want to have both of those signposts annotated. And I want you to think about which detail signals the memory moment for Isabel. Okay? And then how would you summarize this chapter? Don't forget to do your CSCRT. There's plenty of space at the bottom of that last page 12 to do your CSCRT. So I'm going to be looking for your CSCRT. I'm going to be looking for both of those signposts. I'm going to be looking for the gist that I mentioned as I read. And you will have a quiz. That'll be your due now. It'll be on your desks or posted on Google Classroom when you enter. And I expect 100% from everyone. Guys, it's been great. See you soon. There's chapter 2. Chapter 3 is also already posted if you want to get a little bit ahead. We're going to be working through chapter 3 tomorrow, and your exit ticket tomorrow is going to be on chapter 3. So happy reading. Missed you guys today. See you tomorrow.